Welcome to Drive the Daf, clear, structured explanation of the daily daf in 20 minutes. You can even follow in the car.
As Eruvin Daf Mem Aleph ends the chapter called B'chol Ma'arvin, the third parak of Maseches Eruvin, and begins the fourth. About halfway through. So the first half of the daf is the conclusion of B'chol Ma'arvin, and it's discussing the halacha of fasting on Friday when it's Tisha B'Av. And the question of the daf, of this half of the daf, is do you fast all the way until Shabbos, and then you start Shabbos in a very uncomfortable state? You haven't eaten all day, and that is not very oneg Shabbos. It's not how one is supposed to be feeling on Shabbos. Or should one eat a little bit just before Shabbos, even though it's still Tisha B'Av? Is he allowed to eat the last few moments so that he will at least not be starving during Shabbos and be existing in a pain state on Shabbos? That's the question of the daf. The Gemara is going to bring how it was asked amongst the Amoraim, a few positions of Tanaim, and how we paskan halacha l'maisa. Then we'll start the next chapter, which talks about somebody who found himself outside his tchum. What does he do? How far is he allowed to travel? Is he allowed? What happens if he ends up back inside the tchum? How far is he allowed to travel? And a few discussions on that subject. So first of all, the reason why we're discussing the halacha of fasting on Erev Tisha B'Av is because we had just had a list of things that Rabbah said he asked when he was in the yeshiva of Rav Huna, and the answer wasn't clear. So Rabbah says that we asked in yeshiva, we asked Rav Huna, what's the halacha? Do you fast Erev Shabbos? If it's Tisha B'Av, do you finish the fast, or do you end the fast a little bit early so that you aren't starving when you enter Tisha B'Av and when you enter Shabbos and it's not earning Shabbos? The Gemara says that they didn't know, and then Rabbi says he went to the yeshiva of Rav Yehuda, but this time he didn't know either. Not like the last time where Rav Yehuda had the answer. So Rabbi says, let's try to figure this out on our own. We have a brisa that seems to be pretty clear. The brisa says what the halacha is. The brisa says if you have Tisha B'Av that falls on a Sunday, either because it naturally falls on a Sunday or it falls on Shabbos and you push it off till Sunday. So the halacha over there is that on Shabbos you're allowed to eat full. Yeah, you're allowed to eat Sudav Shlamim Melch B'Shatei all the way up till Shkia, till Tisha B'Av. You're allowed to eat whatever you want. You don't fast on Erev. However, if Tisha B'Av falls on a Friday, so then what you do is as follows. Just before Shabbos begins, you eat an egg, a lightly roasted egg, Rashi says, so that you shouldn't be starving when you enter Shabbos. There's another brisa that also fills out this halacha. Rabbi Yehuda says that once we were sitting in front of Rabbi Akiva, and it was Tisha B'Av on a Friday, and just before Tisha B'Av was over, they brought him an egg, and he ate it without salt. Salt would have been extra, but you see that he ate something. The Gemara says he wasn't starving, he wasn't hungry, he could have fasted. Just wanted to show the Talmidim that this is the halacha. You do not start Tisha B'Av in a hungry state. Those are two opinions which clearly say that you do not finish the fast. You end it a little bit early. But Rabbi Yossi disagrees. Rabbi Yossi says, no, you have to finish the entire fast. So, you have Rabbi Yossi against Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi Yehuda, and the Tanna Kama here. So, the Gemara says that there was a discussion about it. Rabbi Yossi said, I don't understand you. If Tisha B'Av falls on a Sunday, so you agree that we stop eating from Shkia, which is technically still Shabbos. So that means you're starting to fast already on Shabbos, on the end of Shabbos. So if you can fast on Shabbos, so the last few moments of Shabbos, so you should also be able to fast the first few moments of Shabbos, where you're beginning Shabbos in a state of having not eaten. What's the difference if he's fasting a little in the end or a little in the beginning? Which is, they said to him, how could you compare? When he's fasting a little in the end of Shabbos, he's just starting to fast. He's full. He's not uncomfortable. But if it's the end of Shabbos, he's starving. If it's the beginning of Shabbos and the end of the fast, he's starving. He hasn't eaten all day. So certainly you shouldn't do something like that. So now the Gemara says, what was the halacha? So Ula says the halacha is like Rabbi Yossi. The Gemara says, how can you tell me the halacha is like Rabbi Yossi? We don't do like Rabbi Yossi. How can I show you that? There's a brisa that says you're not allowed to make a fast for the tzibor. You're not allowed to invent a public fast, which often happened because of tzaros or because of lack of rain, whatever it was. You're not allowed to create a fast for Rosh Chodesh or Chanukah or Purim. If, however, you started a series of fasts, you don't have to stop. That's what Rabban Gamliel says. And Rabbi Meir adds that even though Rabbi Gamliel said you don't stop, but he agrees that you do have to eat a little bit on those days. At the end of the day, you don't fast the full day. You eat a little at the end of the day. And the same thing applies, and this is why we quoted this, the same thing applies to a Tisha B'Av that falls on Erev Shabbos. You don't finish the fast, you eat a little bit at the end of the day. So you see that the halacha is not like Rabbi Yossi. Ula paskin like Rabbi Yossi, that you finish the fast, but Rabbi Gamliel says the halacha is not like Rabbi Yossi. So add Rabbi Gamliel to the list of those who say not like Rabbi Yossi, and add Rabbi Meir as well. So Gemara quotes a brisa here as to what happened with the halacha. The brisa says, and this is again why we're bringing this to show what the halacha is against Ula. The brisa says that the halacha followed Rabban Gamliel his entire life, and everybody would stop fasting a little bit early on Tisha B'Av if it was a Friday. But after he passed away, so Rabbi Yeshua came to the Beis Medrash and he said, now we're changing. We're not going to do this anymore. The Gemara says that Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri stopped him. He said, what do you have right to change what halacha always was? This is what we always used to do. And this is what we plan on following further, because the halacha is like Rabban Gamliel. So the Gemara fills in here that as long as Rabban Gamliel was alive, the halacha was like Rabban Gamliel. However, in the generation of Rabbi Yossi, they followed the halacha of Rabbi Yossi, and they did fast the entire full fast. Now the Gemara says, hold on a second. Are you sure that in the halacha, that in the days of Rabban Gamliel they followed the halacha like him? I'm not sure that's entirely true. We have a brisa that quotes of Elazar ben Tzadok, who was a descendant of the family of Sinov ben Binyamin, and they had their own personal Yom Tov because they had a mitzvah. They had their turn to bring wood to the Beis Hamikdash was on Yud of, was the after Tisha B'Av, and that was a Yom Tov d'Rabbanan for them. And therefore they kept it as a special day. And at one time happened that, well, happened often, most likely, it happened that Tisha B'Av fell on Shabbos, which means it was postponed to Yud of, to Sunday, which was the day of the personal Yom Tov. And they fasted part of the day. They did not fast the entire day because it was a Yom Tov for them. So Gemara says, so you see here that this was a special event that they didn't fast the whole day. But usually they fasted the whole day. Well, how could they fast the whole day? It's Erev Yom Tov for them. They shouldn't be allowed to finish the fast. It's a Yom Tov, just like our Erev Shabbos. So you see, they did not follow the halacha of like Rabban Gamliel. And they lived in the generation of Rabban Gamliel himself. So you see, not everybody in that time followed his halacha because they finished the fast, even though it was Erev their own personal Yom Tov. So the Gemara says, how could you compare their personal Yom Tov, Midrabanan, to Shabbos? You see, on their personal Yom Tov itself, they fasted. When Tisha B'Av came out on Yud of, they did fast. On Shabbos, you don't fast at all. Obviously, it's not the same halacha, so you cannot bring a proof from the fact that they fasted on their Erev Yom Tov, Erev of their Yom Tov, to the halacha about fasting on Erev Shabbos itself. Continuing with its discussion of what the halacha is, the Gemara says that Rav Yosef said, I never heard this thing that Ula said the halacha is like Rav Yossi. They're supposed to finish the fast on Friday. Now, Rav Yosef in his old age got sick and he forgot most of his learning. And Abaye, who was his Talmud, was reminding him. So Abaye said, actually, you did hear it and you told it to us yourself. And you even added to that Rav Yehuda the Amira, Rav Yehuda said, the name of Rav, that's... there's this brisa that was quoted earlier about not making a fast day on Hanukkah and Purim and not finishing the fast on Tisha B'Av if it's a Friday. You said that over, and you even said that Rav Yehuda said that that's Rav Meir and Rabban Gamliel's opinion, but the Chachamim say you do finish the fast. But the Chachamim do not agree. It didn't say what they don't agree to. So those Chachamim is obviously Rav Yossi. And Rav Yossi, you're calling Chachamim. So you're quoting Rav Yehuda who did. So if they're called Chachamim, that means the halacha is like them. And it's like Rav Yossi. That's the halacha is always like the one that we call Chachamim. So therefore you do paskin, you and Ula both paskin halacha l'maisa, quoting this Rav Yehuda, that the halacha is like Rav Yossi, that you do finish the fast. This is not necessarily. It could be that when he said that the Chachamim argue, wasn't referring to the Tisha B'Av on a Friday halacha, was referring to the making a fast day on Chanukah and Purim halacha. And the Gemara wants to actually, you have to say it that way, because remember when we started this whole Gemara, we said that Rabbi had asked Rav Yehuda what's the halacha, and Rav Yehuda said he didn't know. But here Rav Yehuda is calling them Chachamim, so how could Rav Yehuda not know? He himself said this halacha. So Gemara says that's not a proof, because there's another quote of Mar Zutra quoting Rav Huna, who said that halacha is like Rav Yossi that you finish the fast. But Rab also asked in Rav Huna's yeshiva, and they didn't know. So obviously, when he asked, it was before they found out. So just like he asked before Rav Huna found out, and later Rav Huna found out and said it, and Mar Zutra said it over in his name. Say the same thing for Rav Yehuda. When Rabbi asked Rav Yehuda's yeshiva, they didn't know, and then later he found out, and therefore we said over this halacha in his name, and that concludes Perek B'chol Ma'arvin. Now, Perek Misha Yitziu discusses the halacha of Tchumen. We've been discussing Tchumen also in the last Perek, but here we're moving on to what happens when somebody moves outside his Tchum. Now, the halacha is as follows. Your Tchum is wherever you start Shabbos, or wherever you set up an Eruv. That's your center of your Tchum. You have that residential area. You have, if you're out in the field, you have 4 amas in each direction that belongs to you. If you're in a walled zone, so you have the entire walled area. If you're in a city, you have the entire city. And then your 2,000 amas Tchum begins outward from there in a circle extending 2,000 amas in every direction. What happens if you go outside your Tchum? So the halacha is that you're only allowed to walk 4 amas in each direction. You're really not allowed to move at all. The halacha is you're outside your Tchum. You have no right to move. But the space that you are within for your 4 amma space, and we'll see a machlokes how we define those 4 ammas, your 4 amma space is considered to be where you are. And if you're allowed to move around within the 4 ammas, and we shall see the same could apply if you're within walls, you're in a walled area, so possibly you're allowed to move around within all those walls. Now all these halachas apply not only to people, but also to objects. An object is limited to the tchum of its owner. And what happens if it's outside its owner's tchum, that we shall see as we move through the parak. The Mishnah begins by discussing what is the halacha if somebody found himself moved against his will outside of his tchum on Shabbos. That could either be that he was captured or taken by Nachrim, or he went a little crazy, he got a ruach ra, and he wandered outside the tchum without realizing what he was doing, without being in control of himself. So now he finds himself outside the tchum. So the halacha is you're outside the tchum, you're only allowed to move within your 4 amas. Now, if you get moved back into the tchum, again against your will, so you're back where you were and it wasn't your fault, so now you're allowed to be restored to your original halacha, and you can travel throughout the length of that entire tchum. What if you were moved to a different tchum? What if you were placed in a walled area, in a corral, or a pen of some sort, or if you were moved into a city? So now we have a machlekes. On this, Rav Gamliel and Rav Elazar ben Azariah say once you're in the new city, you're allowed to go wherever you want within that city itself. Rabbi Shua and Rabbi Akiva say no, not necessarily. You're still limited to your 4 amas. You're still called outside your tchum. You can't move further than that. Now the Mishnah brings 2 incidents that happened related to this. One is that these same 4 Tanaim were traveling on a ship. They got on the ship before Shabbos, and the ship set sail from a place called Plan Darsin. It set sail on Shabbos, which means that they left their tchum on Shabbos. But now they're on the boat. The boat has walls. So it's a walled area, and they're outside their tchum. So Rabbi Gamliel and Rav Elazar ben Azariah followed their halacha, and they said, well, we're inside the walls. We're allowed to travel throughout the entire length of the ship. Rabbi Shua and Rabbi Akiva were machmer on themselves like their halacha, and they only traveled 4 amas. They didn't move outside the 4 amas the entire Shabbos. Okay, another thing that happened was that they were traveling in the other direction. They were coming into shore on Shabbos, and that means that they came from outside. They came possibly from outside the tchum, and now they're within the tchum of the shore. So what do you do then? So it depends where they were when Shabbos began. If they were within the tchum of the shore of the city that's on the shore, so then they were within the tchum, and it's fine. So they asked Rabbi Gamliel, what should we do? And he said, I was looking, and we were within the tchum when Shabbos began, and therefore it's not a problem to actually continue. Now, the Gemara begins by bringing a brisa which talks about ruach ra a little bit, if somebody who goes a little nuts, and the Gemara interrupts the brisa 3 times to ask, why are you telling me this? So the first thing it says is that there are 3 things which make a person do things against his own will, not in control of his actions, and do things against the will of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And these are avodah zara, a ruach ra, an evil spirit of some sort, and being pressed by lack of enough money to do what he needs. If he's too poor, it could cause him to lose control. The Gemara says, why do you need to tell me this? Why do I need to know that? The Gemara says that you should be mispalel, that these things should not happen to you. So then the Gemara says, there are three types of people which will never end up in Gehenna because of their suffering, and they are somebody who is very poor, somebody who has stomach pains, and somebody who has a lot of obligations. That could either mean that he has a lot of chayvus, he owes a lot of money, and people keep unbothering him for the money, or that he owes money to the government, and he has obligations to the government, and they give him a hard time. Now, some could also add to this list somebody who's married to a bad woman. When it says, we interrupt here, why does the first Tana leave out being married to a bad woman? He says, well, you have a mitzvah to divorce her if you're in that situation. And the other one says, not always can you may have too much of a ksuba, your obligation of how much you need to pay her may be too much to be able to afford to divorce her, or you may have children and you don't know how to raise them, and at least bad as she might be, she'll raise the kids. So now the Gemara says again, why are you telling me this? Why do I need to know that? The Gemara says, the reason that I'm telling you this is because you should be able to accept these Yisurin with ahava, with love. It's a terrible situation to be in, but at least it'll save you from Gehenna of any sort. Now the Gemara finishes the Brisa. There's another list of three people that might drop dead so suddenly they could be in the middle of speaking or doing some other active activity, and all of a sudden the light switches go out on them. So what are those people? Somebody who has stomach ailments, somebody who is in childbirth, and somebody who has a disease called hydrocon, which is a disease of the mouth, which affects the intestines. Again, the Gemara says, why are you telling this? The Gemara says, prepare shrouds. So Rashi explains that the idea is that you should do tshuva, and prepare shrouds now, so that you remember and you realize that you could go at any moment to make sure you do tshuva often, so that this won't happen to you. Okay, the Gemara now proceeds to analyze the halachos in the Mishnah. First of all, we have a same of Rav Nachman in the name of Shmuel. It says, our Mishnah said as follows. Our Mishnah said that if the guy was taken out of his tchum against his will and brought back in against his will, so while he's out, he has 4 amas. When he's back in, he's back restored to his regular halacha. So Rav Nachman says in the name of Shmuel, that's only if he went out against his will and he came back against his will. If, however, he went out willfully, he only has 4 amas. Of course, he only has 4 amas. If he went out against his will, he's limited to 4 amas. If he went out on purpose, certainly he's limited to 4 amas. The Gemara says, no, what he meant to say was that when he comes back in, he only has 4 amas. The Gemara says, well, yeah, that's also true for sure. You can see that from the Mishnah. The Mishnah says the only way he goes back to his original halacha is if he was brought back against his will. If he goes back in on purpose, so then certainly you could clearly see that he doesn't have the entire area. There he's limited. The Gemara says, no. So the chiddush is to tell you that if he went out on purpose and it was brought back in by accident against his will, then he has the entire area. The Gemara says that's the same thing. You can see that from the Mishnah also. It's only if he has both together. He was brought out against his will and brought back in against his will. That's where he's restored to his original halacha of traveling the entire length of the tchum. If, however, one of the two was willful, so then he'll be limited to 4 amas. So the Gemara says you cannot necessarily learn that out of the Mishnah, because when the Mishnah says he was brought out and brought back in against his will, I may think that that's 2 separate cases. Brought out against his will, or brought back in against his will, and each one is a separate halacha, and in each of those separate halachas, the Mishnah is telling me that you could travel the length of your tchum afterwards once you're back inside. Now, what Rav Nachman is coming to tell me is that's not the correct way to learn the Mishnah. The Mishnah only said you have the length of the tchum if you were both, in one case, brought out and brought back in against your will. If one of the two was done willfully, then you're limited to 4 amas even when you come back inside. Okay. Now the Gemara says that they asked Rabbah, what are you supposed to do if somebody's outside his tchum, he was brought there, he's limited to 4 amas, and he needs to use the bathroom? So he said, you're allowed to violate tchumin to go find the bathroom, because it's covered abrius. It's the human dignity requires that you find the bathroom in a hidden, private place, and human dignity is a concept which even pushes off an Isser Da'iraisa. Now, we've seen this sugya before, Isser Da'iraisa, that it pushes off is only an asay da'iraisa, or a lois asay that's not bekumva asay, we don't have to actually do anything, you violate it without any action. Rashi says over here, when we say you could violate the license say deraisa, we're not talking about anything specific. We're talking about the halacha of listening to the chachamim, which is a mitzvah deraisa. That's machlokes rishonim if it's a mitzvah deraisa or not. But here, tchumen is midrabanan, so the mitzvah to listen to the chachamim would be the only deraisa that could possibly be relevant over here. Anyways, the Gemara says it in Narada. They used to say that once the guy has rights to go out of the tchum to use the bathroom, if he'll be smart, he'll go back inside the tchum to use the bathroom. Once he's inside the tchum, then he's okay. He can go back wherever he wants. Now the Gemara says Rav Papa discusses fruits. Fruits which were taken out of their tchum. These are inanimate objects. They have a limited tchum as well. But if they were taken out against the will of anybody, so they didn't lose their place, they're allowed to go back in. You're allowed to bring them in again. If it's yantif, you're allowed to carry them. Why? Because fruits don't have any brain, and therefore it's like that they went out without their will. Therefore, once it's brought back in, and not that you're allowed to bring it in. Once it's brought back in, then you're allowed to move it around anywhere within inside the tchum. So they asked the kasha then. Rav Yosef asked against Rav Papa that we see a brisa. Rav Nechemia and Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov said that you're not allowed to move them around. You're only allowed to if they were taken out b'shoigeg bags, and not if it was removed b'mezid. So Gemara says this is not a problem. You're right, they disagree, but there is a brisa that supports them, and that says that if fruits were moved out of the tchum b'shoigeg, you're actually allowed to eat them. B'mezid, you're not allowed to eat them, but you are allowed to move them.
Drive the Daf is a project of the Grand Woodlands Shul and is presented by Rabbi Yitzchak Landa. Find us on YouTube or subscribe to daily emails by emailing drivethedaf@gmail.com.